Strike up the band so you can get...
Today we're going to talk about 11 tips to help you make the music sound better. Now, I spent 10 years of my career in the Army band, and the Army likes to use a lot of acronyms. And there was one that I really liked, and that's our first tip for today. The acronym was DIAC, D-I-A-C, and it stood for Detect, Isolate, Analyze, and Correct. This was one of the best things that I've seen in the Army, and I've used this even with my own students to help them. Let's break that down a little bit. So detect. Every single musician, even non-musicians like my wife, can detect that something is wrong. They might not know what. They can say, it just doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't sound good. But almost everybody can detect. So then you want to isolate. Was it the clarinets? Was it the flutes? Was it at letter A? Where was it at? Let's start isolating it. Maybe you can't isolate it all the way down at first, but you can start narrowing it down. And then you're going to want to analyze what the problem was. Did a student play the wrong fingering? Maybe they think that they're playing a B flat, but they thought B flat on trumpet was second finger when it's actually first finger, first valve. And so you're going to analyze that. Sometimes there's mistakes in the music. That happens as well. It could be a stuck key. It could be that the student just played the note wrong. So you analyze it and then finally correct. You fix the problem and you go back and listen again. Detect, isolate, analyze, correct. Number 2, step off the podium. I actually have my room set up so I can walk around it easily. It helps with behavior problems, and plus I only spend about half my time on the podium. The other half the time I'm walking around, I'm listening. Sometimes I sit next to somebody, because sometimes you'll hear things that you won't hear from the front. Like maybe one clarinet player is playing the B flat instead of B natural, but you might not hear it from the front of the room because the student is playing so softly. So step off the podium. Number 3, record your ensembles and then listen back. You can either do this as a whole group or you can listen back individually. I sometimes like to listen back right before a break, and I'll use this as part of my lesson planning because I'll create a punch list. And if you're not familiar with what a punch list is, it's usually a list like a builder will use when you go through and you're ready to take possession of a house or a building. And it's like, these are the 10 things that are still wrong, or these are the 15 things that need to be fixed. So I'll create a punch list, and then that becomes my lesson plan for the next couple of rehearsals. Tip number 4, you already know this one, but we all need to be reminded of it. Score study is very important. You can, as you become a more experienced director, you start anticipating what will go wrong. You can just look at a key of a song sometimes and know that if you're in the key of E flat, for example, many of the flutes are going to miss that A flat in that key. And so you can start anticipating things, and then as you're listening for them, you can immediately stop, or you can even preface the rehearsal with, hey, flutes, don't forget there's an A flat in this song. But you can start anticipating that. Tip number 5, play in a group and learn from the conductor. You can learn some things from how well the conductor is doing, as well as what the conductor is not doing well. I've sat in groups before and I thought, I'm in the back and the director's not loud enough. I can't hear them. Does that happen to me as a teacher? I've often sat in groups where there was a lot of wasted time in rehearsal, and that really annoyed me and bothered me. Tip number 6, what am I not hearing? I'll give you an example. Sometimes I've thought to myself, the first trumpet needs to play softer because it sounds out of balance. But when I really analyze it, I realize that the third trumpet that has twice as many students on it, they're just not playing out enough. And once I get them playing out, so I'm fixing what I'm not hearing, then it fixes the first trumpet part that I thought was too loud. So a lot of times the third trumpet, third clarinet parts will be like that. Tip number 7, break things down into chunks. So you've got the rhythm, you've got the melody, and then you've got individuals. And I'll give you an example. Maybe you're listening to a section where the clarinets have staccato, and you're thinking to yourself, this sounds pretty good. And you listen to the section leader play it by herself, and she's playing perfect staccato. And the second chair player sounds perfect. The third chair player plays it too long. The fourth chair player plays it too short. And the fifth chair player plays it perfect. Now that you've listened to the individuals and gotten that third and fourth chair players to fix what they're playing, now you're going to listen back, and it went from good to great. Tip number 8. Bring in guest clinicians. I'm going to say it again. Bring in guest clinicians. You might call a local college. You might trade with a director. If there's another director in your district, even if they're at a different level, trade with them for a day, and they're going to hear and fix different things than what you do. I would actually say if you have $100 for your band program and that's all you have, the best way you can expend this money is to bring in a guest clinician. Tip number 9, listen to great groups, because you're going to find out just what it is your group is capable of. When I go to my state conference and I hear some of the best middle school groups in our state, I start thinking to myself, wow, that's what they're capable of. That's what I can get my groups to if I keep pushing them and keep upping the expectation. Tip number 10, I'm going to tell you a story first before this one. When I was in the Army Band, I had a director who he would start at like letter U and run us all the way to the end and not offer any feedback or anything. And then he'd go to letter T, and we'd start at T and go all the way to the end. And then we'd start at letter S and go all the way to the end. And we knew, and it drove us crazy, because we knew this was not going to end until we finally did letter A all the way to the end, or from the start to the end. So don't do like this particular director of mine did. But here's tip number 10. Don't always start at the beginning. If you know that letter C, it goes into a lyrical section with the woodwinds, then start at C. Work the parts that are a little bit more troublesome. And then tip number 11, tone is king. If you do breathing exercises, if you do long tones, if you do chorales at the beginning of every rehearsal, you're going to find that all of this carries over to making the music sound better.
The Music Ed Podcast, where you get quick and easy tips for how to be a better band.